Good morning. Today we'll continue with anti-diabetic drugs. So let's look into the slides. In the previous class, we learnt about sulfonylureas, megalotonides, biguanides, glutazones, and alpha-glucosidase inhibitors. Today we'll learn about the remaining groups. Those are GLP-1 analogs, DPP-4, and SGLT and your other miscellaneous drugs. First, let's look into GLP-1 analogs. GLP-1 analogs. What are the drugs? Exenatide, liraglutide. These are the two commonly used drugs. Before we understand about GLP-1 agonists, let's try to understand about what are these GLP at the first place. When you take food, glucose reaches the circulation. This in the small intestine, glucose in the small intestine is going to stimulate release of certain incretins. Glucose is going to help in the release of certain incretins. What are these incretins? Incretins are hormone-like substances which are released by glucose in the intestine. So, GLP is a glucose-dependent insulin secretion. So, what happens when GLP is released? On release of GLP, it is going to increase insulin secretion, suppress glucagon, slows gastric emptying, improves insulin sensitivity, and reduces food intake. On long term, GLP increases beta cell mass and maintains beta cell function. So, exenatide, the drug, is a GLP-1 analog. Glucagon-like peptide. What is GLP? Glucagon-like peptide. So, this is going to act like glucagon. It's an analog, so it's going to act like glucagon. So, this is going to have insulin-like properties. It is going to act. Exenatide is going to act like GLP. What is it going to do? It is going to stimulate insulin secretion, decrease glucagon, decrease gastric emptying, improve insulin sensitivity, and reduce food intake. What are the preparations? It is given subcutaneously and it is a injectable 2 times a day dosing. You can combine GLP-1 analogs with other drugs like sulfonylureas and metformin. Because this is twice daily and it is an injectable preparation, liraglutide was obtained, which is once daily preparation. This is a longer acting drug. So this is going to act for a longer time. So what are the limitations, or what are the limitations because of which we are not able to use GLP-1 analogs? It's an injectable, that is why we can't use it, and can't use it in type 1 diabetes and in ketoacidosis. So, let's look into DPP-4 inhibitors. What are these? We already learned about GLP-1. What is GLP-1? Glucagon-like peptide, which is going to increase a little bit of insulin secretion, going to maintain the beta cell mass, decrease gastric emptying. Okay, so GLP-1 is metabolized by an enzyme called as DPP-4, that is dipeptidyl peptidase. The next class of drugs, that is DPP-4 inhibitors, are going to block this DPP-4 enzyme. DPP-4 enzyme, which metabolizes GLP, glucagon-like peptide, is blocked. So let's look into what are the drugs. So what are the DPP-4 inhibitors? DPP-4 inhibitors are sitagliptin, vildagliptin, saxagliptin. What is the mechanism of action? It inhibits DPP-4, that is dipeptidyl peptidase enzyme. If it is inhibited, GLP-1 is not metabolized, so there will be increased levels of GLP. So because of GLP-1 is increased incretin and insulin release is going to be there, decreased glucagon, increased insulin sensitivity is going to be seen. What are the adverse effects of DPP-4 inhibitors? They are going to produce nausea, flu-like symptoms, and pancreatitis. Pancreatitis. So this is, if there is increased insulin release from the beta pancreatic cell, it's going to help to reduce blood sugar levels. So where can we use it? It can be used in type 2 diabetes mellitus. Advantage of this over GLP analogs is these are orally given drugs. Orally given drugs. So these can be given orally. So we looked into these drugs. GLP-1 analogs and DPP-4 inhibitors. Now let's look into the other groups. Those are miscellaneous groups. So pramlintide. What is pramlintide? Pramlintide is a amylin analog. What is amylin? Similar to GLP-1, amylin also is an enzyme which is secreted along with insulin. It helps to reduce postprandial hyperglycemia. This can be used in both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. But the problem is, again, it is injectable. You have to give it subcutaneously or intravenously. Adverse effects: nausea, diarrhea, and headache. What is the drug name which is amylin analog? Pramlintide. Pramlintide is the drug which has to be given. The next group is SGLT2 inhibitors. Where are SGLT2 inhibitors? SGLT. This is sodium glucose transporter. There are two kinds of glucose transporters. One is GLUT, the other one is sodium SGLT transporters. SGLT transporters are of two types, SGLT1 and SGLT2. SGLT1 is predominantly present in the intestine. SGLT2 is present in the kidneys, where the glucose filtered is reabsorbed through SGLT2 transporters. Glucose is reabsorbed using SGLT2 transporters. So SGLT2 inhibitors like dapagliflozin, canagliflozin are going to block this transporter in the kidneys, in the renal tubular cells, that is in the PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. When they block the SGLT2, there is not going to be reabsorption of glucose. Because there is no reabsorption of glucose, all the glucose is excreted in the urine. So this is how SGLT2 inhibitors are going to function. Coming to the last drug used as antidiabetic drugs, bromocriptine. It acts on the dopaminergic control. All of us know it is used in Parkinsonism, but it can also act on the circadian rhythm and decrease the release of maintain the hormonal regulation, growth hormone and ACTH. That's how it can reset the insulin resistance. It is taken early morning in empty stomach. It is usually used as an adjunct, as an add-on therapy in type 2 diabetes mellitus. Let's look into the last part of diabetes mellitus, that is complications. Complications of diabetes can be classified into two groups, acute and chronic. Acute complications is what we are going to be learning. Chronic complications like neuropathy, nephropathy, retinopathy, peripheral vascular diseases, increased risk of stroke, MI, all of this is a part of medicine. So let's now look into acute complications of diabetes mellitus. Acute complications of diabetes mellitus are of two kinds. One is diabetic ketoacidosis and HHS, that is hyperglycemic hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma. First, let's try to look into diabetic ketoacidosis. In diabetic ketoacidosis, let's try to understand a patient who comes to us, who usually is a type 1 diabetic, means young child who has not taken insulin for over 2 to 3 days, who is insulin dependent, has not taken insulin for 2 to 3 days. This probably because there was no insulin, or the kid developed infection, because of which he was not able to take insulin. This results in hyperglycemia, increased blood glucose levels in the blood, which eventually results in production of ketone bodies. This is like it creates a situation of cell starvation. So the cell, instead of using glucose which is in the blood, it is not able to take up this glucose because there is no insulin. Because the cell is not able to take up insulin, it is going to utilize fatty acids. When fatty acids are broken down, one of the byproducts which are going to be produced are going to be ketone bodies. Because protein metabolism and oxaloacetate also is going to be decreased, so it can't utilize it to produce energy, ATP. So instead of that, ketone bodies are going to be produced with less, giving up less energy than with the TCA cycle. So, what are the risk factors, or what are the precipitating causes for diabetes? Ketoacidosis, diabetic ketoacidosis, infections, trauma, stroke, pancreatitis, inadequate doses or missing doses, stressful conditions. So, what happens in diabetic ketoacidosis? There will be hyperglycemia, lipemia, keto body productions, glucose in the urine, glycosuria, and associated with dehydration. This is an acute medical emergency and it has to be immediately treated. Let's try to look into the few diagnostic features. Glucose is more than 300 milligrams, pH acidic, bicarbonates are going to be less, osmolarity is variable, ketone bodies are present in the urine, and there will be huge amounts of dehydration. Let's try to look into what is the pathogenesis of ketoacidosis. Insulin, there is no insulin. Because of that, patient, the glucose in the blood is not being utilized, so the patient develops hyperglycemia. On the other hand, the fats are being broken down, so there will be ketosis, production of ketone bodies. So in the blood, there is increased blood sugar levels. These are filtered and it will cause glycosuria, glucose in the urine. Not only glucose, but along with the glucose, because it has osmotic property, it is going to pull in the electrolytes. So sodium, potassium, chlorides are all lost. So once there is to balance this out, all the potassium from the cell is going to land up into the blood. So there will be intracellular depletion of potassium, which is going to result in hypertension, shock, dehydration, and tachycardia. On the other hand, ketosis can result in ketonuria, ketone bodies, ketonemia. Ketones in the blood is going to be filtered and excreted in the urine. Ketonuria, like ketone bodies, can cause vomiting. Ketone bodies increase in ketone, they are acids, so they produce acidosis. So acidosis, there will be fixed loss of cations, along with that there will be loss of water, and it's going to cause dehydration. This loss of cations are also going to cause hyperventilation. Because of both dehydration and hyperventilation, there will be hyperosmolarity. The water and the electrolytes are lost from the blood. So this will result in hyperosmolar blood, which also is going to cause intracellular dehydration. So intracellular dehydration, potassium is lost and there will be intracellular dehydration. Along with this, ketosis can, if there is a lot of ketosis, all of us know brain depends mostly on 80% of the brain, even during starvation, depends mainly on glucose for its metabolism. If glucose is not there, glucose is not able to enter, it is going to result in impairment of glucose entry into the brain, is going to result in impairment of consciousness. So cellular dehydration along with impairment of glucose entry into the brain is going to result in impairment of consciousness. So this will be the features of ketoacidosis. 1. Osmotic diuresis, loss of electrolytes, hypotension, shock, dehydration, and impaired consciousness with increased osmolarity, cellular dehydration. So how can we treat this patient? this patient he is having dehydration, so he has to be given fluids. He is having potassium depletion, so we have to give him potassium. But the main problem was lack of insulin, so he has to be given insulin. There are electrolytes which are lost, so we will have to give him back electrolytes. These will be the main line of treatment. And treat acidosis. Acidosis we can treat it by giving sodium bicarbonate. So let's look into what happened, how do we treat this condition. So first we start with regular insulin at a dose of 0.1 to 0.2 units per kg IV bolus. After 2 hours, if there is no response, you can double it. So till the blood glucose falls up to 300 milligrams per deciliter, you are going to continue this. Then you can reduce the dose to 2 to 3 units per hour. If the patient after the patient becomes conscious, you can continue with the subcutaneous route. IV fluids, we have to give the patient IV fluids because there is cellular dehydration. We can go with normal saline 1 liter per hour. Later on reduce to 0.5 liters per 4 hours. Then you can start with half saline, half normal saline. You have to administer potassium. We have to administer potassium, nor there is going to be hypokalemia. So depending on the potassium levels, we'll have to monitor this. And sodium bicarbonate for metabolic acidosis. And if there is an infection, we'll have to treat the patient with. If there is an infection, we'll have to treat the patient with antibiotics. So this is about diabetic ketoacidosis. The next one is HHS, that is hyperosmolar non-ketotic hyperglycemic coma. What is this? In HHS, there is no ketone body production. In diabetic ketoacidosis, there is ketone body production, whereas in HHS, there is no ketone body non-ketotic. Other than that, both of these are similar, except that there are no ketone body production. In what kind of a patient you are going to see this hyperglycemic, hyperosmolar, non-ketotic coma? Usually you see in elderly and type 2 diabetes patients. Elderly patients who are type 2 and they are insulin or insulin dependent on oral hypoglycemic drugs. What will be the treatment of HHS? HHS treatment is also very much similar to that of diabetic ketoacidosis, where you take care of dehydration and hemoconcentration and take care of the urine output. So last one, glucagon. Glucagon is a counter insulin. The counter regulatory hormone for that is glucagon. If there is hypoglycemia because of insulin, one of the line of treatment is glucagon. What is the role of glucagon? Glucagon is going to glucose is going to inhibit glucagon secretion. Glucagon is going to increase glycogenolysis, lipolysis and gluconeogenesis. It is going to inhibit glycogen synthesis and glucose oxidation. Glucagon may increase ketogenesis. So where are we going to use glucagon? Hypoglycemia is where we are going to be using. It is used as an injection, IV, IM or subcutaneous. IV, IM or subcutaneous. With this we complete diabetes mellitus. We understood what is diabetes mellitus, what are the what are the treatment modules, that is insulin and oral hypoglycemic drugs. Insulin, what are the insulin preparations, what are insulin analogs. We learnt about oral hypoglycemic drugs, namely metformin, sulfonylureas are the mainstay of treatment, and we also learnt about what is DKA, that is diabetic ketoacidosis, and how do we manage diabetic ketoacidosis. With this we complete diabetes mellitus. Thank you.